So Tim got his COVID shot, but he's pretty. Good. Also, okay. Do we know how we should put on? Because we're warned for the third floor, where I was.
Yeah, that's where I have it in the rooms where it's supposed to be. So I did put a number on mine Karen Busher.
For the front, but not the back.
I just.
Yeah, it's usual stuff.
They really make you record it.
Yeah.
So we're going.
Yeah, they had the whole.
Hi, Romeo, how are you? We're in the Sharon Busher from City Hall. You have to get in by the park. Up the stairs and then look in the basement. Okay, see you soon.
Hello, how's it going? Yes. Oh, it's 100%. And Sam, what a treat.
Sam, want to learn how to run an NPA meeting?
I was just saying, I have an early meeting now. I'm gonna see some work. I know that you're not doing it well, so maybe that would be good.
Well, it's yeah, but happened updates.
Sam, how are you? Hang in.
Yeah, Tim's running for mayor. Take me to him.
Just tell me.
Well, we're gonna run against them.
Sam, how old are you?
The audio should be on.
What about the microphone?
Yes. So I'm gonna try and run a 2-minute movie or so, and I'm gonna bring about feedback and kind of set my system. So that okay.
So at 7 o'clock, we would normally start, but because there's some problems getting in the building, we're going to give everybody a few more minutes, if that's okay. So refresh your drinks, put your feet up. Linda, you're first. And then we'll start in about 4 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
It's been good, other than dragging from the COVID shot. Been good. So we have a flu shot at the law firm every year. And you sign up and they come. And day of, they said we have COVID shots too. And Kate, my wife, was having a hard time, Romeo, finding it too for us and the kids. So I was like, I might as well
Can I sit anywhere, or is it like these seats are?
Like, tell you, Bill. I got it.
Good. How are you?
Excellent. How was your trip?
Outstanding.
I think they can hear this.
Anywhere you want.
Such an amazing trip.
No seating charts and wording.
Good deal.
It's.
Thanks.
I just wanted to make sure you knew.
Hello?
Yeah. why don't you give them-
I don't know if you've heard, you haven't looked up anywhere else.
Did you go to?
Yeah. Speak out for 15 minutes.
I was feeling frustrated.
Then,
On my presentation. Video.
Okay.
So what should I do with my volume?
Charlie, can you started on the mics, okay? Welcome, everybody.
Somebody's beyond me.
Welcome back. Hope you've all had a great summer. This is the first of a series of meetings. We're doing things a little bit different in Ward 8 than some of the other wards. We're really encouraging people in Ward 8 to speak up, raise issues that are of concern to you at the beginning of the meeting. But we're we're asking that people be brief. We will end by 8:15. I don't mean to be rude, but I will either ask you to speed up or slow down so that we can be respectful to those of us who have to go home and get a good night's sleep. So try to hit your high points. Don't repeat stuff, and get to the points. We see the word NPA, or at least I do, and Romeo can share if he has a different viewpoint, about a place where we can connect with each other, have the opportunity to meet people, hear the ideas, and then follow up with additional meetings outside of here, so that there's connections that are built within the city and particularly within Ward 8. We are not going to be a debate society. We're not going to be a city meeting. We're really not going to problem solve. We're a little bit complaining inside here, but for the most part, we don't want to dig into anything in detail, make the points, get names, put your information out there so people can contact you, because the issues are too important to solve in 1 hour, one day a month. So that's kind of how we're doing it. I'm glad everybody's coming. I want to hear as many voices as people can say. Romeo, you want to jump in here quickly? And how many hours have you been away?
For quite a while, sure. My name is Romeo. I am a member of the steering committee for Ward 8. As Bill put it out, NPAs are pretty important. Civic engagement is incredibly important as well. We can't emphasize more than that has already been said. And I think our counselors agree with that point, I suspect. But just to shorten it, I just came back from my trip in Africa and I had a great time. But it's not about me, so we'll just go to the meeting itself.
All right, let's quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Bill Church. I live on Bradley Street. Romeo,
University Heights.
can you introduce?
So just name and where you live?
Yep.
Okay. Zoriana, UVM's campus, on campus.
Excellent.
Darren Springer, Ward 7, Burlington Electric.
Etameno, South William Street, Newly Ward.
Excellent. The new blood, that's what we need.
Hi, Scott Wasita.
Charlie, you want to just say hi?
Charlie G, Ward 2.
Ashley Adams, Ward 6.
Pike Ward also.
Sam Doherty, Ward 1. I'm Tim Doherty. I live in Ward 1 and I'm on the city council.
So I'd like to open it up to anybody who would like to comment on what life is like in Ward 8, issues that are important to you. We will be discussing the old YMCA building as an open discussion. Bruce Baker couldn't be here, but it's a time and an opportunity for people to voice their concerns, raise some issues. And then there'll be a 30-minute discussion on the power plant. And then we'll hopefully have Tim and Hannah and Gary Golden, who I see is on for the school board, just to kind of update everybody about what's going on in those activities. So, oh, you have to leave early too, right? All right, so we'll make an exception here to have Hannah start if you want to.
Okay, do you want us to give council update? Because I feel like we can bounce off. So, well, we can do public one first. Like,
Okay, let's-
I'm not gonna.
All right, it's open for any buddy who wants to raise their hand and have a few words.
I don't know if we get interrupt from folks online.
Scott, are you letting people in who want to speak? If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. Don't make me call on you. Okay, let's move forward then. So Hannah, do you have an update on anything going on with YMCA?
Yeah, so before getting into that, the general city update, it's been a little while since we met as a group. A lot of work that we've been doing on the council, and nothing super major, I would say. And then in committee work, I'm on the HR committee, and right now we're going through the personnel policy manuals, we're looking at remote work and social media and finalizing that. So I'll be meeting next Wednesday with the committee, and we'll have a finalized personnel policy that I'll be able to share with all of you. In the committee on community revitalization, we are working through a homelessness update. So we met last week and got updates on what the homelessness issue looks like throughout Chittenden County specifically, and the work that the city's been doing. Nothing major to report. The work is kind of continuing from the CETO front, and so we didn't start any new business there. And then I'm also on the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee. And we just finished working through the, we're like gonna dive into the district energy vote, which folks are here tonight to talk about. So I'll let them kind of own that. I don't know if there's anything else on.
So you said that the homeless issue is now going to be a county issue.
I think it's always been a county issue, and that's how a lot of the data is collected, because it's very difficult to collect data just based out of Burlington.
So it's just data collection, or are they actually working together from a county standpoint?
From my understanding, there is a county group that is meeting together to try to problem solve.
And anything from the state?
I mean, the state, I have nothing to report there. I think that they are preparing for the upcoming session to see how they can supplement in on the work that Burlington's doing, but I haven't heard.
Are our state representatives tapping into the discussion on homelessness? Don't know, obviously not clearly.
I haven't heard any conversations.
We have, so I'm on the Public Safety Committee. We have a draft resolution that hopefully will come before the city council during our next meeting, which doesn't address homelessness specifically, but does address public safety. And in it, we call on Montpelier to do a number of things, including releasing a significant amount of this opioid settlement money that appears to be hung up in Montpelier, providing more judicial resources, providing more resources to the state's attorney's office. So, you know, advocacy on behalf of the city to Montpelier is definitely at the forefront of the city council's discussion. Where that advocacy will lead, don't know, but that's a significant part of what we've been talking about. And you'll see this resolution as a number of clauses in which we, demand things, and at least put pressure on Montpelier. I and Hannah, I know agrees with me, very much believe that the homelessness issue, as well as these other public safety issues that we're seeing, really should not be burdened by Burlington alone, that these are at least countywide issues, if not statewide issues, and need to be addressed by more than just the taxpayers of Burlington. We have an obligation to do our part, but this is a regional issue, at least.
I have a question regarding the chronic theft that's going on, and I think Councilor Shannon brought up during the last council meeting. Is that is also being discussed at the last meeting that the
So the public safety, yeah, so Romeo, the Public Safety Committee, which is myself, Councilor Paul and Councilor Grant, have been meeting, including last week. I think it was 4.5 hours working on this resolution. I think it's close to being done and close to being presented to the city council. I'm hopeful that the city council will vote to approve it. I'm hopeful that it's bipartisan. And it addresses retail theft. It is, part of, it is, I don't want to get into too much because we haven't publicized it completely yet. It's not quite finished. But we envision going forward a number of informational sessions. We're asking for things from Montpelier. We're asking people to come to the table and present us information. And we're not waiting for that either. So for example, yesterday I met with Councilor Shannon, Councilor Barlow, Councilor Paul, State Attorney George, Chief of Police, both of whom graciously gave up an hour in their busy afternoon to talk about retail theft, graffiti, and the general public safety issues. It was an informal meeting, but we're pressing. And so I think collectively, many of us on the city council, well, I'll just speak for myself. I am not clear. I think many of us are very clear that what's happening right now is not working. I am not clear exactly where the breakdown is right now in our criminal justice system. And I suspect that the answer is that there are many places that are not connecting within our criminal justice system that has many most complicated problems. There's not just one answer, but getting better clarity on, what is the relationship between what's going on and the number of police officers we have. Are the police citing cases that are not going to the state's attorney, that the state's attorney's office is not prosecuting? Or if they are prosecuting, are they held up through lack of judicial resources? What is the resolution of those prosecutions? How many of them are going to, the restorative justice program? How many people are successfully completing the restorative justice program? How many people are washing out and ending up back in the regular order of business? There's a lot of, in my opinion anyway, there's sort of a lot of fluff in the air, not fluff, but there's a lot of things that are being said about what's going on, but I don't personally feel like I have a full understanding of really what the breakdown is. And I think the hard work we do in the next couple of months is get some clarity.
So I'm sure that issue will come to a Ward 8 steering committee. It's an important issue in Ward 8. What do you suggest the people in Ward 8 do to support or get involved in this particular issue?
I think right now, the citywide, at least, I think just having everyone focus on reaching out to their counselors and expressing their concerns and what they're seeing every day is really important. I know that it's a little bit more challenging because in Ward 8, I think we're pretty much on the same page of we understand the issues downtown, and we're trying to do whatever we can to figure out the public safety issue. But I think it's gonna do the law. We're only 2 votes, and so we need the rest of the council with us, and so just advocating for folks in other parts of the city to get involved and put pressure on their councilors and everything is very important. And then also just our normal monthly city council meetings are a great platform to go and speak on public forum, but also don't forget committee work and like the public safety committee is a great place to go and not just bombard and with more folks, but I think a lot of the times being in committee, you're able to have more in-depth discussion than we're able to have at a council meeting. So making sure that you're paying attention to what's going on there is a huge part. I don't know if there's.
I agree completely. I mean, the more voices that we hear from people's experience downtown as residents, as business owners, as parents, as elders, as young people, I think the more voices we get in the room on that, I think the more helpful it is. I personally believe, and I think Hannah agrees with me, that we are at a really critical inflection point. I don't profess to have the answers. It's a complicated problem.
Right.
But I think the urgency has to be maintained.
Right. I am a member of stolen bike group on Facebook as well as car stolen thing. And this thing gets updated practically every day that somebody's car was stolen from their parking lot or bike was stolen from the porch. It happened to you as well.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it might be a good idea for, you know, community, Ward 8 members to kind of get, you know, on that Facebook pages and whatnot, and just tell folks, hey, reach out to your counselor, speak up if your car was stolen, speak up to a counselor, or, you know, report to a police department, whatever. But I tend to agree that sentiment of reach out to counselors or folks to, you know, speak up more.
So I have a question on whether this is an issue of policy only or assumed standards within the community. And I'll give you an example. When I walk home, I often go by people who are comatose on the sidewalk. That's not okay. But when I call the police or the fire department responds, they know who it is. It's repeat offenders. But what is my responsibility when I see open drug use? And what is the expectation of how I can help? Or do I just ignore it?
Yes.
So it isn't policy that's written, it's standards.
Yeah, I mean, that's two different things. So if you. And I get a lot of questions about this as well as a counselor, but then also like through my work. If you're walking past someone that clearly is experiencing a medical emergency, which you can assume is drug related, but a medical emergency, just flat out call 911. That's the number one thing. If you see someone that is, even though they're going through a challenge or could use someone to check in with them, calling Howard Center Street Outreach is also another way to do that. And I can send around over email or post on Front Porch Forum all of these numbers, but that's another way to contact someone. But the number one thing is if you see someone that you think is overdosing or going through a medical emergency, call 911. That is the exact thing that you need to be doing. Is it a policy issue? I mean, I feel like that's what we're trying to figure out right now is how we can help folks, but then also I think it's no secret that our downtown and city in general, we're really not helping folks in the way that they need, and that's why it looks as though things are in shambles in a way, at least from what I can experience. And so I think that's what we're trying to kind of pivot our work to look at right now. And again, we don't have any answers. If we did, we would be probably solving problems. But
So are there any other questions for Hannah and Tim? If not, Gary, you want to jump in and tell us about the new high school? This is Gary.
Try again. Am I on now? So, if you've been following the news or my Front Porch Forum postings, we have gone through a bit of a rough spot with the funding. We were delayed getting started with the deconstruction of the high school because of the lawsuits And then we've also found some unexpected contamination through some of the building material that was used in the foundation of the leased wings A and B. We are now having to readjust our financing, our funding because of those delays. We've had to push construction into the winter that we weren't expecting, and there are just higher costs to that. Labor is not as available. Materials are more expensive. We're also limited in the number of bids we've gotten for the work. And so it's not perhaps as competitive as we thought, but we really don't have any solutions other than to stay the course. We're still within the funding that we asked the voters for, and we are cognizant of the need to keep the costs down. We're just at a point where getting the costs down could degrade the building itself as far as the longevity of a new building. We'd love this thing to last many decades. And so we really are committed to building the best building we can within the constraints of the funding and the conditions of construction at the moment.
Really no plans to increase the budget or ask for more funding yet.
There's not even a yet. We're going to stay the course. We have, I think Tom's last letter, there are two different funds that totaled about $15 million that we can still draw on. And we still haven't touched the money from the state. I believe that's accurate. So we're staying the course. We had a contingency fund built in. We've tapped some of that.
If nobody objects, I'd like to hear from Sam, who's our high school attendee, of how this is affecting his education.
Yeah, I would say it was definitely disappointing to hear that I wouldn't be going to the new high school. If somewhat not unexpected, but going back, not to go back to the public safety thing, but I think it's hard to go to school downtown, not only because of the building, but because of what is around the building and what I see when I walk to school. And you know, it's hard seeing that stuff, and I know it's hard for other kids, and I've heard about it from other kids, right? Seeing some of the drug use and fights and the bus station, it's tough. So that is.
I would like to top that off. And I agree with you 100%. Really, I basically,
I see Romeo every day. The bus.
Thank you, sir.
Which makes me very happy, by the way.
Thank you, sir. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said, really, and it's heartbreaking to see that happening and see, kids being exposed to what's happening in downtown, and I wish something could be done to alleviate the stress that you basically face every day coming to downtown with all the stuff that is going on. But I hope the city will find some form of resolution to expedite things, whether it's funding or whatever is going on. But I just want to top that off and say it's just regretful what's happening, really. This is affecting the students over there going to the school, and the kids that come over to Church Street area as well, and us staff members who are at the transit center every day, who are exposed to needles and people fighting. I mean, I just left there right now, and the police is already there responding to a concern already, and people are basically just shooting their neck, whatever, any way they find. And so it's just heartbreaking to see everything that's going on really there. And it's just, I don't know what, I mean, is it policy breakdown? Is it just lack of accountability? I mean, it's sometimes I kind of like wonder what else can be done to alleviate folks from doing what they're doing in downtown, because they're affecting practically everybody, from high school students to adults to families to just about everybody. And I do speak to some of these folks who I do get some from time to time chance to kind of get a picture why they do what they do. but it's difficult to get a good picture of what they're doing sometimes because they think that you're either a police officer or some kind of investigator trying to find out what they're doing and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think the solution is out there, and it's just a matter of us collectively figuring out as a community. I just want to top that off.
So as a community in Ward 8, we have University of Vermont as a major factor in Ward 8. Has there been any consideration the university attempt to support the enrichment of our students in Burlington? I know you don't make that choice, but I often look to see that, we're asked to accommodate the university and their needs, and nobody's saying that they're not an economic engine here, but could they do more? I mean, could they meet specific needs, especially around education? Why those discussions don't happen?
Well, I mean, I will say that there are discussions happening. Hannah
Great.
and I have met, summer
With UV.
UVM twice. Our specific issue was trash. But
So we're also figuring out how to, and just all of these discussions are executive session, so we're not allowed to share.
Okay, are there other issues before we get into the
The why.
energy plan? If you have update on the why?
Yeah, I was gonna say, before I have to head out. I've been working with Bruce Baker and just reading, email that he sent me because he's not able to be here tonight. The permit application process has been moving forward. They received approval from the Design Advisory Board and Development Review Board. They're in the process of obtaining final permits and creating construction plans. He still does not own the property. He's offered his assistance to the current owners because there's been limited management of the site. His hope is to close on the property as soon as possible. Only once he owns the property will he be able to take down the building and put it into place a more sustainable site model. And that promise to kind of keep us updated on what's going on there. That's about the update that he has since he last met with us.
I just wanted, if you don't mind, Bill, just to quickly interject and, toot Hannah's horn a little bit because she won't do it herself. Hannah in recent days, spent an incredible amount of time and resources working with Bruce to make sure he knew what city resources were available to him in response to the homelessness encampment. And it just took an incredible amount of time and energy. And I really appreciated someone else on the city council. And I just want to really call out Hannah's work on that.
Absolutely. And it's the encampment issue and then also the, I hate the term quality of life issue around parking and students. And whether those have been presented to Bruce too, when you've met with him, is that possible enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's obviously a very challenging issue, and it's one of those situations where you run into the fact that it's a private property. And so there's not a ton that you can do to police a private property as a public official. Nor should there really be. I don't think people want officials policing private property. But then beyond that, we know that South Union is a street where a lot of folks are traveling through with their families to go to Edmonds. And so it just is not safe for younger folks, nor should they have to travel through needles and just trash everywhere, but also understanding that we're not really providing the individuals that are in need a compassionate response to what they're going through. And so a lot of the work that I have been trying to facilitate is making sure that the property manager knows their rights and are able to work with BPD to trespass individuals when they need to, but then also making sure that the individuals in need are connected to street outreach. And are at least being presented with the resources that are available to them right now. And then making sure that the neighbors that are living around the area as well are being heard. And so I think as of right now, it seems as though I don't want to call it an issue, but the property seems more secure. And so I'm hopeful that we can keep it that way. But obviously if there's specifically individuals walking sidewalks and such, that's when I can step in and help make sure that we are clearing sidewalks, so it's not an accessibility issue, but.
Anybody who would like to comment on any of this, just raise your hand on the Zoom and I will try to, I can see very clearly who wants to speak up. So in light that nobody has raised their hand, I'd like to move to the issue, which is the second issue, which is the power plant and issues around that. Pike, would you like to start?
Sure.
You've got 15 minutes here.
Sure. Microphone's muted. All right, so thank you for the.
That's what it is. All the microphones are live.
So folks out there can't hear me, let me know. But thank you for letting us speak. I'm Pike Porter, this is my wife Ashley Adam. And we here are here to discuss why we don't believe that the district energy proposal should go through. And it's really all climate related. A lot of the information that we're basing our decisions on is you can find at the Tube Symposium that happened on June 13th. This QR code will take you there. I encourage everyone to watch it. We had two eminent climate scientists present. Their presentation starts at minute 34. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about Bill Muma, one of the presenters. He's been the lead author of 5 major IPCC reports. He's worked with the Senate to stop CFCs and spray cans to help protect the ozone layer. He's a world-renowned climate scientist, and we were privileged to have him. And I hopefully will show 4 minutes of his presentation. So we're here to talk about a district energy system, which leads us to talk a bit about McNeil, although there's separate issues. District energy system is going to pump steam 2 miles up to the hospital for heat. It's going to cost about $42 million. It's going to increase wood burned at McNeil, which in turn will increase CO2 pollution coming from McNeil. And at $42 million, it's going to prolong the life and our dependence on McNeil. Now, McNeil is our a wood-powered electricity plant, the largest power generator in Vermont. And it emits over 400,000 tons of CO2 annually, making it the largest stationary source of greenhouse gases in Vermont. We're here tonight because we believe in science and we believe in the scientists who study our climate. We need to quickly and drastically reduce our greenhouse gases in order to avoid warming our planet another 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have about 7 years to cut our emissions in half and about 27 years to bring them to net zero. 2023 may very well be the coolest and driest year in the rest of our lives. And now by the video.
Zoom, yeah.
It's just not, is it going to the people who were there and just not us, isn't it?
Looks like it's.
It's not working.
All right, my apologies. I hear that no one can hear the video. Unfortunate. Hopefully I'm no longer. All right, feedback. Anyway, Bill Muma knows his way around the IPCC. He helped write those guidelines. And he came here to tell us that burning wood is worse than burning fossil fuels. And that's what it comes down to. A little bit about McNeil. 25% efficient. The district energy system will make it about 29% efficient. Department of Energy advises that modern district energy systems are 65 to 80% efficient. That comes from the Burlington Electric website. Burning wood emits more CO2 per unit energy than fossil fuels, including what we call natural gas or fossil gas. I'm gonna skip this because I think I'm running out of time. I missed the time there. But the proposed district energy system increases our greenhouse gases in a time frame that's too far out. And we are trying to hit some goals at 2030 and 2050. And that's now is the moment we need to reduce our gases. And the district energy is going to increase it at this very moment. Here's a graphic that shows how much more emissions wood creates over here at over 3,000 compared with natural gas over here in blue. So it's 3 times the amount. So these numbers are taken from Burlington Electric studies and Vermont Gas studies. These numbers, Evergreen might be running the district energy system. It sees the light of day. They estimate that the system will displace about 13,000 tons of CO2. First Environment claims that the district energy system will increase pollution through fuel usage by 8%. EPA indicates that McNeil pollutes over 400,000 tons of CO2 annually. So the district energy system is going to create about 32,000 tons. It displaces 13,000 tons. So we see a net increase of 19,000 more tons of CO2. That's the problem with the system. Now, Bill Muma is not the only scientist who believes this. This is a letter signed by over 500 eminent climate scientists to world leaders, Biden and other world leaders that say we can't replace our fossil fuels with burning wood. There are 28 pages of this. I'm not going to scroll through them all, but I would like you to know it's out there. The letter says burning wood is not carbon neutral and it's not climate neutral. It creates a carbon debt that takes decades or centuries to repay. Forestry growth takes time, and the world does not have time at this point to solve the climate crisis. The sustainability and renewability of the wood that you use does not change the fact that it worsens the climate crisis. Emissions from CO2 begin an irreversible warming process. The subsequent removal in the atmosphere cannot stop. You cannot unfry an egg. Scientific studies indicate that the life cycle of burning trees is decades to centuries. And again, we have deadlines of 2030 and 2050 that Burlington Electric refuses to recognize. Just one headline of many articles, scientific papers I've read. Maximum warming occurs about a decade after carbon dioxide emission. So you're going to hear about a lot of studies that Burlington Electric has done. I want to make clear that these studies have 4 things in common. They all assume that burning wood is carbon neutral. None of them count the 400,000+ tons of CO2 emitted at the stack line at McNeil. They don't consider the time frame in which we must reduce our emissions, and they ignore or disagree established climate science. This graphic represents the amount of CO2 that they do count. This little black line down here, and the brown is all the CO2 that they exclude from their accounting. So why district energy now? Well, the Affordable Heat Act, recently passed by the state, requires Vermont Gas and other fuel dealers to come up to acquire clean heat credits. And district energy will provide Vermont Gas with clean heat credits. Neil Lenderville, the president of Vermont Gas, was a principal architect of the Affordable Heat Act.
Pike, thank you for presenting. Would you like 5 minutes of people to ask questions? If you end here, we can get 5 minutes of questions in.
Sure.
If anybody has any questions. I can't see the hands. No, because we have another speaker. Linda, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I did. I was wondering whether or not they knew, whether the speakers knew whether or not any alternatives to this expansion were considered, and is there any federal money to help for cleaner energy?
I think I don't know, and I don't believe that other alternatives have really been considered, mainly because this has been placed into the Affordable Heat Act as a process that'll create heat credits. But if you just think about the process, it would make a lot more sense just putting a high efficiency wood-fired boiler at the university, at the hospital, rather than pumping steam 2 miles up the hill. A new modern boiler could create efficiencies of 80% or more, rather than 29%. But no, I don't think that's been considered. I do know that others are looking at geothermal options and somehow using that to at least help get the heat, the temperature of the water up to something usable.
Is there any technology in development that would capture the CO2?
Trees are our best technology for capturing CO2. They are the cheapest, most efficient, most effective way of doing it. And when you cut them down, you're removing that ability to do so. People are spending millions and billions of dollars to try and reproduce what trees can do a lot more, almost at incredible efficiencies.
What about algae mass?
That also works.
So is there any development? Could this become a research activity in a small place like Burlington where we look into some technologies that address the carbon capture?
So other vegetation systems, algae, hemp, corn, switchgrass, these also capture carbon. The trees are unique in that they live for 150 years if you let them. So algae dies quickly, switchback dies quickly. So that life cycle that we're talking about happens more quickly. We can lock up and store carbon for centuries with trees. It would be better for the climate to continue burning gas at the hospital than to burn wood. We were, we just increased our carbon emissions that much more when we switched to wood.
Any other questions?
Briefs here, I know there are.
Yes,
Here.
good point. Can you just say how people should get in touch with you? What would be the best way?
So we do have a website and it's stopbtvbiomass.org. And you'll find all sorts of good information on that website. You can also contact me through that website and I can share research articles and all sorts of really helpful information. And this brief, I can also send you, this is a brief that is just a very concise distillation of the two presentation by the two climate scientists back in June. So this is a great document if you want a 3-page read of the issue. Very helpful. We also have a petition that you can access on our website, and I have it with me tonight. Petition has a lot of detail about the issue, and if you would like to make sure that it doesn't happen, please sign this petition.
Thank you for coming. Daryl, would you like to get 15 minutes?
Great. Let me just get that going. Hi, I'm Darren Springer, General Manager, Burlington Electric. I think since we did introductions, my colleague Jen Green has joined. We have another colleague, Betsy Lesenkowski, online here, who's our Chief Forester at the McNeil Station. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. Give me just a moment to pull those up. Let's see, looks like that's working. Just get the slideshow going. And there we go. So for folks who may not be familiar, Burlington Electric, we're the municipal electric utility. We're part of city government, over 100 years old. We do operate a number of different power facilities, including the McNeil Generating Station, which is the largest power producing plant in the state of Vermont since Vermont Yankee closed in 2014. We also have a website, burlingtonelectric.com. If you go to burlingtonelectric.com/McNeil, we have resources regarding question and answer sheets. We have a webinar that was recently recorded with communities in Lund, Sweden, Halifax, Canada, and St. Paul, Minnesota, that are also using district energy with biomass, talking about how they're working their different systems. We have a variety of third-party reports on there. We are proud to be 100% renewable since 2014, first city in the nation to reach that accomplishment. Since we reached that accomplishment, we've been focused on the idea of net zero energy 2030. Which means becoming 100% renewable, zero fossil fuel for thermal and for ground transportation. We track that progress every year, and this is data from our roadmap that shows that, particularly in the commercial sector, we're seeing a bit of a rebound in natural gas use. We're going a bit in the wrong direction there, as you can see. Overall, when you count the transportation and thermal sectors, you can see we had a good dip into the pandemic. And then we've had kind of a flat/modest rebound since that point. We really want this to be trending downward. The reason we're here talking about district energy is the single biggest step that would bend that curve down and get us off of fossil fuel at an important sector in the community, which is the commercial sector, which is tougher to decarbonize. You cannot, the hospital uses steam. You cannot make steam at the pressure and temperature needed with geothermal. I wish we could, because we're big supporters of geothermal ground source heat pumps. We use those. We supported those at Hula. We're supporting them at the new high school. You can't use that type of technology to decarbonize at the hospital. So district energy is one of the few technologies that actually would meet the energy needs, the reliability needs at an institution like the hospital while getting us off of fossil fuels. And I would mention that our boiler at McNeil is actually between 80 and 85% efficient. So when we talk about McNeil efficiency overall, McNeil is 25% efficient because producing electricity from a solid fuel with moisture content on wood chips doesn't lead you to a particularly efficient result. But when you use it for thermal energy, when you use our boiler to produce steam to send up to the hospital, we get actually a 10% boost to the efficiency of the plant overall. We have an 80 to 85% efficient boiler there at McNeil. This is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change most recent report, 6th assessment. This is from the Energy Action Network website. They're an organization that works on energy in Vermont. And it notes that of the total anthropogenic human-caused emissions in the last decade, the combustion of fossil fuels was responsible between 81 and 91%. Fossil fuels are driving the climate crisis. That's the challenge. That's what we need to tackle. That's the by far most dominant source. As you can see here on the right, their graphic, when we take fossil fuel from underground, we put it into the air, we're taking carbon that's been stored for millions of years, and we're putting it into the atmosphere for the first time in recent history. When we use, whether it's biomass or other kind of growing things, we are using carbon and we're both sequestering it when the plants grow, we're emitting it when we cut or when we emit from burning, but it's part of a different carbon cycle, what they call the fast domain carbon cycle, that's above ground, that's been above ground for recent history, that's been part of our climate in recent history. So there is a difference there. That's acknowledged by every scientific body from the IPCC to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources and others. This is from the IPCC report, the sixth report, AR6, which notes that essentially producing energy from forests along with producing a sustained yield of timber and fiber can generate in a sustainable strategy a large mitigation benefit. And in fact, this chart here is the IPCC looking at options for how we reduce carbon, how we mitigate carbon relative to our 2030 goals. And bioelectricity, which is what we do at McNeil, and bioelectricity with carbon capture and storage that I heard you mention earlier, and which can exist for biomass plants, are both a piece of the puzzle, not the only piece, not even the biggest piece, but a piece of the puzzle. We talk about forestry, we talk about sustainability. It's really important to note what we do is not go into the forest and cut trees for energy. We don't do that. In fact, we don't cut trees at all. We work with private landowners who are harvesting. We work with licensed foresters who are harvesting. And when they use the wood for higher value purposes, whether that's for furniture or for saw logs, whatever it might be, and this is our contract here with our language, we take the leftover tops and limbs, the damaged diseased trees, the non-commercial wood. We're able to use that wasted wood for energy at McNeil. That represents approximately 88.5% of our energy fuel needs in 2022, comes from those types of sources. We also get around 10% from sawmill residue, which again is just waste at a sawmill facility. 1.6% from our waste wood yard, where residents of Burlington and surrounding community can bring untreated waste, and 0.3%, less than 0.5%, from what's called low value round wood, which are, if you see logs at McNeil, this is low value round wood that's been harvested in an otherwise commercial harvest, but it's not commercial product. We keep that on site because certain times of the year, mud season, for example, you can't get in the woods, you can't produce wood chips. So we have that for fuel security purposes. This is just another representation. This is the Department of Energy, National Renewable Energy Lab, looking at a life cycle, apples to apples, 3,000 different studies harmonized to reach these numbers, carbon value for per kilowatt hour. And you can see biomass at 52, that's the median value, way better than natural gas at 486, oil at 840, coal at 1,001. I want to note, it's not as good as wind and solar. It's not as good as nuclear. It's not the perfect solution. It just happens to be a lot better than fossil fuels. And that's what our focus is not being on fossil fuels. I'm going to skip through this because this gets into some detail, but basically it's saying that the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, the federal government, they follow the IPCC guidelines, which means we look at a life cycle basis and we count emissions from harvesting wood in the land use sector. We count the emissions when the tree is cut. We credit the land use sector when trees regrow. So if you hear about McNeil's emissions, these guidelines, which we follow from governing bodies in the scientific community and in state government, say that those emissions are accounted for, but they're accounted for in the land use sector. When we think about the land use sector, this is data from a third-party report looking at the lands where McNeil is receiving wood. And it shows that in those lands, those private timberlands between 2007 and 2020, we've added over 24 million tons of net additional forest carbon storage. So we're not losing forest carbon in the areas we harvest, we're actually gaining it from sustainable efforts at managed forestry, which is good news. And then just lastly, in terms of our fuel supply, this is from the Manomet study that Dr. Mumma, who was referenced earlier, has cited favorably. And Dr. Mumma cited this study. This study wasn't particularly favorable to biomass, but what it said is if you're using the tops and limbs, the residues that we use at McNeil, then biomass electric power is better than natural gas, has a quicker payback for carbon than natural gas compared to fossil fuel alternatives. And then here we are. What are we here to talk about? It's district energy. 2 minutes, I can breeze through. Here's the map for the project, goes from the McNeil plant up to the University Medical Center, could connect to other buildings, including at the university or other buildings along the way. But the primary goal at the moment is, can we get to the medical center? Reduce 225,000 MMBTU of natural gas, equivalent to 16% of our commercial sector natural gas use in the community. And it's a combined effort. It uses waste heat from McNeil. It uses steam from McNeil. There's efficiency savings at the hospital. And it also has an electric boiler that can run when prices are low. And then just lastly, I think this study was referenced. This is on our website. We had third-party analysis using the model that's developed for the clean heat standard that the legislature passed, says that the McNeil district heat project reduces greenhouse gas emissions over 95% relative to natural gas. That's why we're pursuing this project, is because we believe, and the data here definitely supports, that this is a better fuel than fossil fuels. And we're going to keep McNeil. McNeil's an important resource. Nobody here tonight's talking about shutting off McNeil. We couldn't afford it. It would be bad for reliability. If we're going to keep this plant running, let's use it more efficiently. And this is a great first step to do that. Thank you for your time. Glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Darren. Any questions from anybody? I have two. I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Linda.
So I have a question about the carbon emissions and like particulates. Can you speak to how much, or if that is going to increase like in the air locally, in the local atmosphere?
Thank you for the question. So the first piece of information is running district energy does not necessarily require using any more wood. And in fact, we use more or less wood on an annual basis, depending on the electric markets. And that'll continue to be the case. If the electric market prices are high, we're going to try to run the plant more to insulate Burlington ratepayers. Some years they're not as high, we don't run it as much. So there's some variability. Our particulate matter is at 1/10 of the state level and 1/100th of the allowable federal level. Our NOx emissions are between 1/4 and 1/3 of what the state allows. And that's because of investments in pollution control technology at the plant that were made, particularly in 2008. So we don't foresee any operational changes in the McNeil plant as a result of district heat.
So while the wood burn is variable at McNeil, district heat will increase any given year's wood usage by 8%.
I'm sorry, my time for questions, right? That's not accurate.
I think we can both answer questions.
Well, we're just not going to have a debate.
Right.
But he's allowed to ask questions.
Well, no, but I thought there were other questions online. I just wanted a chance to answer questions. That's all.
Is Burlington Electric exploring nuclear in the future?
We're not. The community really decided back in 2004 that we want to move away from nuclear. Interesting question, though. But no, we're not currently looking at that. Yeah.
So nobody has said we're going to take the McNeil plant offline, but if it goes offline, what happens to my electric bill?
Well, we estimated for fiscal year 23, which is the last time we looked at this when we did our rate case. If we didn't have McNeil that year, 20% rate increase.
And you showed a slide. I don't know if you can go back to your slides.
I can.
The very first one where you have you're looking at the greenhouse gas emission with a future state. It was a second or third slide.
See if I can get back here. Hang on one second. Let me know when I've got it.
Keep going. That.
There we go.
You know, that looks like my phone app weight reduction plan for me for the year. And it's a little bit misleading, isn't it? Because, you know, your eyes go to the steps, but what bothers me about this is that granted that 2020 was a year that probably is not going to happen. We hope it doesn't happen again.
That's right.
That your GHGs are high. And if they don't go as predicted, is there a plan to address that?
So actually, yeah, it's a good question. This actually is progress. It's just not as much progress. We're actually lower on emissions now than we were in 2018 when we started tracking the data by 11+%. So the community has reduced emissions. The question is, can we reduce even further? And can we get on that path that gets us on a steep downward trajectory? They've gone up slightly since 2020. But if you look starting at 2018, which is kind of when we started this tracking exercise, overall, it's down about 11.2% since that point. But I take your point, like we want to continue to drive it downward. We support a variety of things, electric vehicles, heat pumps, we've supported electric transit buses. We actually just introduced our first electric bucket truck for our line crew There are a variety of solutions that can help us move in this direction. Federal legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to help with this too. But we need kind of an all-in effort. We need technology development. There's a lot that has to happen to get us all the way down to that end of that line.
But does Burlington Electric now EV vehicles coming to market a lot? Are you guys gonna be opening EV charging stations a lot?
We are. In fact, we have a new one at our office at 585 Pine Street. First fast charger, modern fast charger in the community. We have another one planned for the Marketplace Garage, and we have a team that's trying to get federal resources to really make fast charging available all throughout the community, as well as we do level 2 chargers at public stations. We're working with rental properties, try to add those at rental multifamily. So charging is a big deal. We need to make it accessible for everybody. Yeah.
So both sides seem to like trees, and I like trees. Why?
Yeah.
Is there a way we can plant our way out of this?
Not really. A slide that I didn't get to represents a 150-year-old oak, which equates to, I think, 465 10-year-old oaks in terms of the same amount of carbon storage. So we should certainly plant trees, but cutting down a mature tree and saying, oh, I'm going to plant another one, the time lag of centuries, the math doesn't work if we're trying to meet these deadlines in 2030 and 2050.
What are all of us willing to give up in this? I mean, maybe that's the question. Like, what do we have to give up? You know, I don't hear that's a conversation.
So, on our end of things, first of all, again, we're using wood waste. So if you're going to assume that we're not talking about 100-year payback for harvesting a tree, because we're not cutting trees for energy. I think we have to assume that the forest products industry is going to continue to operate in the state of Vermont for the foreseeable future. And we're a market for that wood waste. That's kind of the first piece. The second piece is we should be really proud to be in a community that generates our electricity without relying on fossil fuels. That's a good step forward. We can use EVs and other things to benefit from that. With this plant, I wouldn't argue that it's perfect. I wouldn't argue that maybe 20 years from now, we might not be able to look at ways to, if there's new technology or there's more solar, wind, and batteries, maybe we'll be at a point where we can step away from it at some point in the future. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there in the near and medium term. And I think it's really important because you asked the rates question. We need a balanced portfolio. Just like, if you're investing in the stock market, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. We don't want all of our power generation coming from one type of resource or one location. We need diversity. We have that now. It's well balanced and it serves our customers better.
Sam, I want to ask Sam a quick question. What are you willing to give up to make this problem better?
I don't know.
Tough, yeah. Because it's, you're the next generation.
Well, it's definitely a problem that we're in.
Hey, it's our fault. I take full credit. I take full responsibility. Yeah, we should have done something earlier, sooner. But, how do we engage people who are students into taking ownership of some of this? And unfortunate, you got to do what you got to do, right? Anyway, I'm not supposed to say these things.
But, we should be. Problems and all of the anxiety that comes with it. I think what we're losing sight of here and what every climate scientist in this world will tell you is that it's about carbon emissions. And while I applaud efforts to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, that is the entirety of Burlington Electric's focus. And lost in the conversation is that this plant emits more CO2 than any stationary source in this state. District Energy, so let's just put aside the issue of should we close the plant down? That's not what this conversation is about. District Energy will increase reliance on that plant for how many years? Why would we do that when we know about these emissions? Burlington Electric doesn't count those emissions. They're not being straight with us. And that really makes me angry as a ratepayer, as a resident, and as a mom. But let's just lay that out on the table. We know that because the EPA has that data. And I have a printout from the EPA I can share with all of you tonight. It's about carbon emissions.
Bill, may I respond briefly?
Well, I didn't hear a question there. But yeah.
I take it, we're a public agency. We're an arm of city government. Our job is to provide information. There are reports on our website, the site link that I shared, that show exactly what the stack emissions of McNeil are. Nobody's hiding anything. Nobody's not being straight with the community. I have children too in this community, and I've spent my entire career working on climate change. I wouldn't be bringing this project forward if I didn't think it was a benefit for climate in the community. Sorry, no, for the community. Please don't interrupt me. I did not interrupt you. This is a climate project for us that's been a long held goal in the community. It does not hurt the plant's operations. It improves the efficiency of the plant's operations by 10%. So if we're going to have the plant and we want to use wood more efficiently, this is a great first step. There are other things we can do as well. I just, on behalf of the Burlington Electric employees who are public sector employees, we are not a for-profit entity. We are not ExxonMobil. We work for this community. We provide 100% renewable electricity. And those types of comments really misrepresent who we are. And so I'll always speak against that.
Are there any other questions, please? We have a few minutes. Linda.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the hospital because it seems like this plan is premised on helping the hospital. And I was just wondering if you could just briefly explain what those needs are. And yeah, and I guess is there a property tax consequence here?
It's a good question. The first answer is there is no property tax implications from this project. This project is not taxpayer financed. It's not Burlington Electric financed. It would be financed by a nonprofit entity that would issue bonds to pay for the project and would sell the energy to the hospital, and they would repay the bonds through the sale of that energy. And the only role for Burlington Electric or Vermont Gas would be to provide incentives under state programs to support the project. So that's an important point. I thank you for that question. The second point is the hospital is a customer of ours, and we work with them on a variety of things, energy efficiency in new buildings, helping to reduce their consumption. When it comes to the needs they have there for steam, we've learned a lot because the original version of this project was a hot water project, and we realized that it's not really interoperable with their system. So when I became general manager in 2018, and the first question at the press conference was, what are you going to do about district energy? How are you going to get it done? We went to the hospital and we said, what would work for you? And it had to be based on steam. Now, to be clear, the hospital, this has to work for them. And we won't bring this forward if it doesn't work for them economically, and if it doesn't work in terms of helping to reduce their fossil fuel use. So that's a really good point. It's a good question. It would be addressed as part of any proposal to the city council.
Go ahead.
Since you become the manager, what is the biggest phase during your tenure?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we're in a really dynamic moment. I think we're in an exciting moment in a way because we're able to use our assets to really help people with transportation, with heating in ways that we couldn't before. So I think this project aside, managing what I think is a fundamental transition of being a monopoly electric utility that serves to keep the lights on and keep the power running, to becoming 100% renewable, to now our goal being we want to actually compete for your dollars in transportation and heating because we have a cleaner fuel, a more local fuel, a cheaper fuel in the transportation sector. That's a fundamental shift within the utility business. And I think we're managing that transition, and it's an interesting and dynamic time.
We're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for coming. Remo and I often talk like, what happens if nobody shows up? And he has his slides ready to go. Remo, you want to tell us a couple of things about Africa before we go home? We've got 2 minutes. What should I go see when I go visit?
The people.
The people?
Yes. The people, the nature. I've had the privilege of having to go back to my place of origin. I guess that would be the place of origin than everybody. But I'll just try to summarize real quick that it's a beautiful continent. I hope everybody has the chance to go there and see it. It's nature as you know it, really, once you're there and just immerse yourself with wildlife and the people and just the trees.
Before it all goes away.
Speaking of it the entire time.
Mm.
So yeah, it's amazing. I just went to the Horn of Africa and I took some time off just kind of going to the wilderness and away from humanity in general. So, yeah, so it was fun. Yeah, so.
Well, I'm glad you're back. Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Scott, for running the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next month.